All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Jess,
And I'm Scott.
and we are going to get into our exciting content very soon. But first, we just wanted to take a minute to walk through a few housekeeping points that are going to help you get the most out of your time with us here today. Scott, where should we start?
Yeah, so first I want to draw everyone's attention over to the questions section of your webinar console. This is the best place to get involved, get interactive, and post all your insightful questions, comments, feedback, and ideas. In fact, why don't you find that tab now and give it a test run by saying hi to the community here with us today. And as a quick side note, that window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues during the session. Don't forget that a browser refresh should clear up any of the more common issues with slides or audio, but if not, just shoot a message in that questions tab and our team will be there to help.
I'm so glad you started with the questions tab, Scott, because I am going to take us all just one little hop over to the handouts tab. So the handouts tab is going to be absolutely full of cool resources and takeaways. You are going to want to check that out. It'll help you follow up on this exciting conversation that we are about to have. And in even better news, it is not just awesome content that we are giving away today. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here in live attendance during the webinar, and all winners do need to meet the prize terms and conditions. But if you're not sure what those are, we have them linked for you right there in that handouts tab that we were just chatting about. So just click in, scroll down, you'll find them all waiting for you there.
And we have one more exciting prize to tell you about. So today we'll be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to the best question asked during the webinar. So keep in mind that the team will review all of the questions after the webinar wraps, which means that even if your question does not get read out in our live Q&A, there's still a chance to win. And as always, we'll reach out via email to our lucky winner after the event.
All right, well, I think that was it for all the housekeeping stuff. We are primed, we are ready to rock. Let's get to our webinar.
Hey, Jess, thanks for those housekeeping tips. My name's Cindy Davis. I'm the Content Director for AZ Technology, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's webinar, Facilitating Seamless Collaboration. Easy for you to say. As Jess mentioned, this is an interactive panel, and we hope that means you too. So throughout the webcast, please submit your questions via the question section on your console, and we'll take as many as we can throughout. And don't forget to download the helpful resources in the tab next to the questions from our sponsors. So speaking of our sponsors, next I would like to thank them. Thank you to Atlona and Barco. And now I'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, provide a little bit of information about themselves and their company to provide a bit of context as it relates to today's discussion. So up first, Dan Root.
Hey, it's great to be here with you. My name is Dan Root, and I'm the head of Global Strategic Alliances for ClickShare, which is part of Barco. Barco was actually the Belgian-American radio corporation. We've been in business for 90 years, and we're based out of Kortrijk, Belgium. And we work in 6 different business units across 3 different major areas, the first of which being entertainment. And we're well known and established within projection. So if you've been to a movie theater in the last couple of years, it's very likely you saw a movie on a Barco projector. We're also well known within medical, which is within diagnostic imaging. So if you've gone in for a mammogram or things like that, it's very likely that those images and x-rays were viewed and reviewed with that doctor on a Barco display. And then also within MX, which is meeting experiences, and that's ClickShare, which is the business unit that I represent. And we work to bring better collaboration environments within the meeting space, and specifically through our products under the ClickShare name. We work to try to build a better tomorrow in conjunction with companies like Atlona through our partners and resellers such as RedThread and our other major corporate backers and partners like Microsoft and Zoom and Google and things.
Great, thanks, Dan. And Jonathan.
Jonathan Kiley. I am the manager of the sales engineering team at RedThread. We're a furniture, architectural products, and technology company in the New England area, servicing basically all your needs for corporate, higher ed, hospitality. So any of your needs in New England, feel free to reach out.
And I have to say, I've been to the RedThread offices in Boston at the Seaport. Unbelievable. Why I don't commute in there, I don't know. Actually, I will be maybe. Great spaces. Very inspiring. Daniel Williams, you're up.
Having me, Cindy. I'm excited to be part of this webinar and learn more what everyone thinks about collaboration. It's a kind of a common word and means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. As I mentioned, my name is Daniel Williams and I work for Atlona. I'm a technical specialist and trainer. And Atlona is a company that's been in business for about 20 years, and we make the hardware solutions that help facilitate all these collaboration and meeting room systems. I like to say that a company like Atlona, we're the meat in an AV sandwich. We don't make the sources, we don't make the displays, but we make everything that goes in between them. Things like extenders, switchers, control systems, all those kind of solutions that make the collaboration and meeting room systems actually function at the deep core level. And I'm happy to be here today.
That's a great description. I love it. The meet in between. So I live just north of Boston and Cambridge. And this time of the year, a lot of our neighbors get together, and the discussion often turns to work and, commuting times. It's actually one of the reasons why I might not go into Boston. And Big Pharma is huge around here. And so many of the conversations go to like, I'm never going back into the office again. And so I find out why beyond the commute, which is always awful. But one of the main reasons categorically each person says they'll never go back into the office full time is their conference and collaboration software and devices in the meeting room spaces never work. So they all go to their individual offices, open up their laptops, and talk to the person down the hall doing this. It's crazy. And it's common. So we can all agree that the in the office meeting and collaboration experience, if it's less than what it is from what you can get at home, the office is doomed, but not so fast. We are here to discuss facilitating seamless collaboration, the new modern workplace. And that does mean in the office and other locations as well. So let's get started. So I'd kind of like to start off by defining what seamless collaboration should look like, and then how do we get there? Jonathan, I'm going to come back to you. How are conversations going with Red Thread clients? Tell us about some of the objectives that you're hearing, and how do you guide them?
Certainly. So I would say the important thing is just that, understanding what the objectives of the room are. A lot of times it may be harder than you would expect to get those. You hear, what doesn't work, but understanding, what you need the room to do is the most important part. And our role is kind of steering customers with, what we've seen work in the industry, pitfalls that we've run into, other customers have run into, and kind of steering them along that journey to what will provide them the most effective solution for their needs. I will say a thing that definitely helps is having kind of that strong direction and leadership from the client end of, this is what our rooms are going to support. These are what our rooms are going to be capable of doing. And then providing us that, and we come up with the parts and pieces and the ways to make that happen. What kind of leads to those rooms that fail and kind of fall apart is we come from an industry and a system that 5 years ago a meeting room had to do all these extra features other than just host a meeting, and we're still trying to make these newer systems and UC platforms do everything a room used to do 5 years ago. And that's really where the room gets overcomplicated and starts to fall apart. So kind of, steering the customer to where we've seen problems and, make sure that they're kind of aware of the trade-offs when they start to add complexity and add features to rooms that maybe aren't built to do that. I'm an engineer by trade. I will find a way of making anything work. That's kind of a challenge that I enjoy, but is that ultimately what you're looking for? And is that going to make a successful space and a space where customers and clients want to come in and use the rooms? And that's ultimately what our goal is.
So Dan and Daniel, I know you're out in the field a lot and talking to your customers and clients, and talk a little bit about how you guide those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my perspective and from the click share approach to things, we're looking at how do you make a space as simple as possible, and how do you find a common denominator across all of your people. And we've seen the first iterations of that, which is the easiest way to do it is find the common denominator, which is the UCC platform. The challenge becomes nobody works in a bubble. And so, to your point, Cindy, about that you brought up at the beginning, you're going to have a Zoom invite or a Google Hangout invite that's from an external source, whether that's a customer, whether it's a supplier, whether it's a consultant, that happens to use a service that's other than your own. And realistically, it's not your meeting to host. So you don't really have the place to be able to say, let me send my invite out so that we can meet on Teams. So you end up in a challenged position where if you're bringing people back into a space that's not aligned to be able to work for them, you really degrade that trust and that value that employees need to feel from their employer to say, I feel engaged, I feel seen, I feel like the job that's being asked of me is something that I can achieve. And so we really try to break it down to three areas. You have to look at your people, and that's your workforce, and you really have to assess what type of a workforce do you have. Then you need to, and that's through surveying, through interviewing, but also putting in place feedback loops and multimodality across feedback loops. So you don't just have one way that an employee can go and search out to file a ticket or file a problem, but you have multiple ways for that employee to engage when you're in an experience and testing things out. And once you understand, how do my people tend to operate, you can start to align that to the workflows that they are going to be doing for the business and also to the overall office environment and to kind of that workspace itself, to be able to align the equipment that's going to let you get those workflows done as quickly as possible, and also aligns with the way that your people tend to work. And the reason why I say that's so important, you have to start with the workforce first, is because we have such a wide array. And I think, Jonathan, you probably see this better than anybody. There's such a wide array of ways to tackle a problem and ways for a company to look at things. And when a company is growing very aggressively and is maybe on the smaller side, some of the solutions that are out there that work in their environments and work really, really well will not scale to work very well for an enterprise. And so you end up in a challenge situation where it's not a one size fits all. You really do need to do some assessment and looking inwards and aligning. And folks like Jonathan and at Red Thread are the perfect sort of partner to kind of help you work through that process to come up with what is the best solution for my room so that my people have a seamless day as they come in and go out. And I'm not adding more challenges or more hurdles to getting their work accomplished by asking them to drive 30 minutes, 45, an hour into the office just to sit at a desk.
Cindy, you mentioned in the very beginning how people are wanting to do more of their meetings in their office with their where they're directly face to face with their own computer, and that in its nature is sort of the challenge that we have in the industry to create seamless collaboration in larger spaces where there's multiple people. It's a very different user experience, and the interaction with the technology is very different between me and my computer alone, and now I've got a room of 4, 5, 6, 20, 100 people, and the software was created for that single person user interface. And now we've somehow or another have to adopt that technology to a multi-purpose room space, a multi-person room space, I should say. And so that's one of the challenges we in the industry have is building technology solutions around, Microsoft and Zoom have made fantastic software technology, but they're building it in a sandbox or a bubble of it works on a computer. And as usual, our industry, now we have to take stuff that works in one way and adjust around it to make it work in environments it was never intended to do. And that's how companies like Atlona and Barco and others have come around, is we're making the solutions so that these single user interfaces and devices can now be used with multiple people in a larger room in a larger space. And Jonathan's company now has to become the experts at how do we make those things work together. And so it's an experiential thing that the people doing these projects have to have the knowledge and experience of knowing how to make that happen. And Jonathan, something you mentioned while you were talking, about how you have to work with your customers, you almost have to reel in your customer with some of the things that they want to do and help them understand that the experience of them at their desktop, we can try and make it that same way in the other room. But the more they start adding to it, the more things they start trying to do, the more it's going to go away from that desktop experience or the laptop experience that they're thinking about. And so helping them understand the pitfalls of doing some of the things they may want to do. You may even have to tell them, no, you don't want to do that. We've all had that experience of the conference room with glass walls, hard ceilings, hard floors. And they go, yeah, I want to do audio conferencing in here. Yeah, we all know it's not going to work very well with that hard acoustic environment. You have to somehow or another explain to your customer why that doesn't work, or say to them, okay, here's the things that we need to do to fix it. So it's the same thing with these collaboration solutions. We as the experts in industry now have to educate our customers in how to make those collaboration systems go as easy as they possibly can with the technology that we're using today.
But I've got a little bit of a follow-up from that. So, I do a lot of case studies, and when I see these amazing rooms where there's these video walls, in the conference rooms, and people are sharing content. Because if you're going into the office and spending time commuting, whatever, you're going into the office, and there's mandates. Some companies have everybody in the office, but the whole idea of being in the office is about being able to collaborate face to face and on projects. So when you're in a meeting room and you can actually share content up to a wall, or people can actually work on a project together, and sometimes that conference, people from that conference room will also be working outside with people in other locations. And that's I've seen in some cases this work, and it seems like the nirvana. How difficult is this?
Well, I think from the ClickShare perspective, that's really what we're working towards every day. So we are trying to solve for that gap, which is to say, hey, you have folks that are going to come into a space and they need to flex as easily as possible. We have achieved that with the CX50 Generation 2 with what we call meeting switching, and certainly not to give a shameless plug at all here, but the idea of I have a Microsoft Teams room or I have a Zoom room, but I'm going to have content flows where I may need to host a Google call or maybe a Ring Central call, which really isn't one of the ones that gets usually included in direct guest join. How do I place that call in this room? Or I just need to be able to do different types of content sharing, or multiple pieces of content need to be shared at the same time out of the room. We're able to, with some of our devices, work hand in hand with the Microsoft Teams Room device to be able to switch that mode between MTR and that bring your own device. And we bring what we do best, which is bring your own meeting, or bring whatever you'd like to the room, more or less, wirelessly into the space to allow you to have that flexibility in those rooms, so that as you walk in, you can either enter into a Teams meeting and do things as you'd like, or you can say, hey, I need to run this as a Zoom call and just initiate it off my laptop, plug in and press the button that you'd be used to from the last 12 years that we've been in market. And really be able to jump off and use the room however you see fit. So we are getting to a place where we're starting to break down those walls. And we are also seeing at the platform level that they're making advancements in being able to bring things together. I think there is still a big barrier, and I think Daniel brought it up, between the workspace itself, or the workstation, I should say, where you're sitting during your day, and your meeting spaces where you're going to get up and go to meet with your colleagues, and bringing that experience and making that transition as seamless as possible. I think there's still a lot of work that has to be done there. But as far as being able to at least break down some of those barriers that have been in our way up until this point, and if I can harken back to a term that we've probably all heard in the past and heard it be killed, but walled gardens that we have, so to speak, within the software stack, and are starting to be able to have that flexibility in the meeting spaces. But we're still at the early stages of it, so it's going to be coming more and more into those meeting rooms that you are utilizing today, or that your customers are deploying, where you're going to have that flexibility of, I still need to do whatever I want with the ease of my device, but I also want this to be as easily managed by IT as possible, and still have an easy standard for my meeting spaces.
I think the challenge, Cindy, is getting the end user, the customer, to understand what's possible and get them to understand what can be done and what can't be done. That room you mentioned, some of the reason why that room happened is because the stakeholders of the end users either were educated on what could be done or knew what could be done, and they had the momentum behind it to say, we want this to happen. Because it is all too easy for a customer to just say, well, stick a TV on a wall, plug an MTR into it, and we're done. We have an MTR meeting room. Okay, yes, you do, but there's some caveats to that. There's some limitations to that. Whereas if you have certain functionality that you want, the ability to share content, the ability to do both Teams and Zoom and Google or whatever, if that isn't part of the understanding of what they need the system to do, and the customer just thinks, well, I want an MTR system, well, then they're going to get an MTR system. So there's that part of it as again, our responsibility of us and our industry is educating these people if they don't know the possibilities and showing them what can be done. But then again, there's not that there's anything wrong with just a TV and a wall and an MTR system. That's perfectly usable in the right application. So that's.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Jonathan. Or not Jonathan, Daniel. With that last comment, it's about finding the right match to the workflows that you're going to do within the space. If it's a small huddle space or a small meeting room that's going to be used, primarily for internal use, and you don't have guests coming into that space, an MTR is going to work great for you, especially if you're a larger enterprise. But if you have a place where you're going to have guests coming in, well, trying to bring a guest and getting them to share content into an MTR call is a little bit of a challenge if they're not on your network and not approved and not added to the meeting, so on and so forth. So you have some challenges. So maybe there's a tweak to the way that you do that MTR room if there's going to be external facing folks coming into it. Can still have the same underlying Microsoft ecosystem involved. So you still get to check those boxes the way you'd like, but you're formatting it to what the actual needs are of the room so that you ensure there's not going to be a frustration point where people are walking around going, that room doesn't work because every time we go in it, we can't do what we want to do.
Yeah, I think also that kind of vision of what that utopian room is or was has changed in the last 5 years. So that big room where your whole team is in the room looking at one large monitor with hybrid work, before it was my room needs to call maybe another team across the country, but my whole team's in the office. Now we have people working remote, people working on different floors, people working in different buildings, different countries. So a big thing that comes up and is asked for is that equity. Everyone wants equal equity in the room, on the screen. And that's why people are a lot more comfortable where they're sitting in front of their computer because they have a right-sized display. They have a camera that's taking up one window in a Teams call, and then you go into a large room. And that's really where we try to take a holistic approach to the design of the space. A 40-foot long boardroom with 10-foot ceilings is not the right space to have, that type of a meeting in that space. The TV can't be large enough. The camera, views and angles don't really look right. There are certainly workarounds and ways around that, but starting with the design of the room and what you're intending to use that room, the furniture that you're putting in that room, the shape of it, the location of it, it's not just technology that leads to a successful space. It kind of starts, from the ground up, and that's where it kind of helps to have those conversations much earlier in the process.
Jonathan, that's a really great point. And I just got a question for you. Are you designing? I know certainly in higher ed, there's often the 3 different types of rooms, and they standardize on. It's like, okay, so how about like large enterprises? I mean, are you seeing that where there's I remember hearing this like even 5 years ago. There's the small huddle space. We're not seeming to use that as much anymore. Are you standardizing on 3 different types of rooms, whether it's a Zoom meeting or Teams, and more collaboration? What kind of rooms are you designing now?
Yes, I would say that the size of the room in most applications is shrinking. There's just not as many people in the office, so they need more rooms, but smaller rooms. And obviously the technology and the equipment that goes into that space is different than your boardroom application. where I believe, the kind of growth in UC in the Zoom and the Teams, kind of really where that shines is by having them kind of control that user interface. So you're not running into, older AV systems where a medium conference room maybe had a button panel and a large conference room had a small touch panel, but the boardroom had the wireless touch panel, and everything kind of looked different and felt different, where Zoom and Teams kind of lock that interface down. So whether it's a huddle room, a training room, an MPR, a collaboration space, that interface is the same. So it really does help deployment and get customers to be comfortable walking into any room, because the buttons are always going to be in the same place and the interface is always going to look the same.
I agree.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing at ClickShare, where we're working to partner with Microsoft for those exact reasons, which is, if somebody is a Microsoft ecosystem, it is best to keep them consistent. And at the end of the day, it's not about whether it's my UI that you see or somebody else's. It's about the overall UX and bringing together a solution and a workflow. And so consistency is really what matters there, and making sure it's familiar to people that are going to use it. So it needs to be a simple process that's repeatable and easy to learn. When you have people that are in hybrid situations where you're in an office a couple days a week, maybe you're in a meeting space 1 day a week or 2 days a week, you have to be careful with how quickly those updates go out or new features are brought out to those spaces from a software perspective. And especially that gets exponentially more complex and difficult if you are adding in different types of platforms or different types of control systems into the mix, because now you're going to have multiple software experiences that are updating on different timetables, which means that folks have to relearn and get familiar with new changes in a really haphazard manner. The thing that folks always resonate with when we go out and speak to them is that the one thing they love about ClickShare is it's the same experience I've known for a decade. I plug in a button, I press the button, and I'm off to the races. And I think that does still ring true across a lot of different technologies. The simplistic wins out. It is about me being able to learn it and repeat it across every meeting space. And so the more we focus on creating those simple interactions, the better the adoption rate will be, and the less the friction on a day-to-day basis.
I would like to say, however, over the years, I have seen systems, AV systems, by every manufacturer under the sun, and successful systems have always been the ones where the people who are responsible for the technology in the space, whether that's the IT department, the front desk lady, whatever, when those people are engaging the end users, showing them or teaching them or training them how to use the system, those are always the successful systems. Regardless of the technology, if it's a system that just gets put in and then everybody just has to figure out how to use it, those are always the unsuccessful systems. And it's regardless of the technology.
Yeah, and you want to be able to walk into a room and be able to use it, obviously. And I don't know if there's really that easy button that's out there for every room, but it's certainly what our industry is working towards. So you have all touched on some of the topics that we wanted to discuss a little bit more in depth. So interoperability between manufacturers, always an issue. We've seen so many manufacturers form partnerships more than ever before, because you've got to be able to work with Teams and Zoom and each other. And you are doing that now. So talk a little bit about that. Daniel, because you're, as you mentioned, your company is making everything work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, that interaction, that the partnerships that you see going on there was driven a lot by the pandemic and the adoption of the Teams and Zoom rooms technology, and those manufacturers being at the heart of the systems, basically requiring certain products and certifications with the certain products. And so it forced us in our industry to start to have the partnerships necessary to make those systems work. Very few of us make everything that makes up a system. You know what I mean? So as soon as Microsoft and Zoom started saying you have to have these certified products, if we as a manufacturer couldn't make that product and make it be certified, we started saying, well, to be successful, we have to work with someone. It's also a little bit of competition in the market. Our industry has never seen so much competition in its entire history. 20 years ago, there was a very small number of manufacturers making the products that we would put into a system. Today, you could have a product category and there could be a dozen different manufacturers all making very similar products. And so that naturally started making the need to start having partnerships as well. And then the additional adoption of, let's say, more consumer-based products. Your webcams are becoming such an important part of the systems we do. That's generally considered more of a consumer type product. And during the pandemic, the necessary adoption of those consumer products, the webcams and such like that, again, started making it necessary for those of us in the commercial AV manufacturer to start broadening the people and the companies that we work with so that we could get our sales and get our systems installed. So I think those are the kinds of things that are causing these partnerships to happen. It's just the maturity of our industry.
So
I think it's
go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I think it is the maturity of our industry, but it's also where the devices and the intelligence or the amount of processing power on the devices have led us. We are at a place where you've got, a lot of, I wouldn't say sensors, but those are still growing, but you have a lot of inputs and data that can be read off the devices themselves and provide insights that are valuable, especially on, resolution time to when a room goes down and things along those lines. So because there's more processing built into the devices that we're seeing in the rooms, it's kind of natural that we need to work together more because we're having to pass through more signaling. I know at ClickShare, that's one of the things that we focused very heavily on. And, I am the head of alliances here, so this is an area that's close and dear to my heart. Atlona is one of our partners and has compatible hardware with us, and we really focus on the fact that from an AV perspective, the market has exploded. I believe there's something like 48 or 50 audio and video camera bars, USB bars, or collaboration bars in the market at this point in time. So to say that it's a crowded market is an understatement. And so we are, at least at ClickShare, had gotten to the point where we had 600 devices that we were working with last year. We have cut that back. Thankfully, a lot of devices have gone to a family mentality, which is to say, hey, we're going to make 3 different variants of the same chipset. So at least if you certify or look at one, it works for all of these different variants, just depending on the size. So we have seen some real good inroads there. But we're hopeful that in this next generation of products that we're seeing come to market, and with the enablement of AI in the background, we're able to partner even closer to create, because you won't need as much manual work on being able to provision, where an agent, an AI agent might be able to go through, learn the Atlona documentation, learn the ClickShare documentation, and be able to set up that room and provision that room without a human being involved, outside of them plugging in, obviously, the devices in that space. So I think we're very hopeful that partnership will continue to be a real driver of success and innovation, at least for ourselves, from ClickShare's perspective. And I think, I speak for the UCC platforms and the other, companies such as Atlona, where you guys deal with the control and the hub, that we're able to continue to grow and create a more integrated, curated experience for the users that come into the spaces here in the next couple of years.
I'd like to ask the audience a question of folks listening. Do you already have fully functioning collaboration spaces? And so that's a caveat. That's a huge, what is that exactly? As we said earlier, tell me. Put into the questions what your collaboration spaces look like, or you just don't have it all at all, and that's why you're here. Would love to hear from you. Got a question here. What trend do you see for the near future in terms of meeting spaces? Is there a need for more small hybrid meeting rooms, or is there a need for medium and large rooms also growing? Jonathan, why don't you take that?
Yes, certainly. So one of the things that I kind of touched upon is that kind of meeting equity. So you'll see this with Zoom and Teams, things like Front Row, where there can be multiple people in a room, but they have that same user experience as if they were all sitting in front of their laptop camera and screen. And again, there's different technologies that support that feature in different room types. So I would say that's definitely something that kind of multi-stream video, so that I'm not just looking at a big room with a bunch of little dots in that represent the 20 people in the room. The 3 or 4 people speaking are kind of being presented to a larger extent. And then, a lot of things that get talked about with AI, automation, virtual assistants. So, one thing that, I've always struggled with is you'll have a meeting and a lot of great things are captured, but no one's ever taking those notes. And there's, you leave that meeting and somebody interprets something one way and somebody else interprets it another. Chat and virtual assistant being able to transcribe that meeting, give you a summary of, what are my takeaways from that meeting. That's definitely steering, the more that these meeting rooms and spaces and collaboration devices add to their feature set, the more easily that they're kind of received and more well they're able to roll out, because people want to use the room, because there's benefits of using the room versus just a one-on-one call or a one-on-one meeting. So it's making sure that the spaces provide a technology and an experience that drives usages.
Just want to, some people have been answering my question. All of my clients have small, medium rooms. Where they are struggling is how to make remote workers have better experience, whether that's employers, partners, vendors, etc. Another person here says, widely varied across buildings, campuses, cities, trying to develop an enterprise standard that is both moving target and sometimes something of a pipe dream. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So talk a little bit about that. How do you make a better experience for the remote worker?
So the interesting part is, for a remote partner, their experience is improved by you improving your space, which has always kind of been the interesting proposition. So by a client spending and improving the audio quality, the mic quality in their room, that provides a better experience for the people on the far end. So you may spend a lot of money and have really high-end AV systems, but your in-room experience may not be the best if the room that you're calling into hasn't deployed that same technology. So I would definitely say for your remote participants, having great audio solutions, having great cameras, having the ability to have those cameras that have AI or multi-stream capability that are able to switch to the right camera based on the person talking. That's truly what's going to make that room really work for people calling in remotely.
That's great. That was actually going to be one of my next questions. What are those elements? So do you have a standard room design-ish what are the elements that you feel are absolutely critical for that meeting equity?
Yes. So, audio is always the most important, going back to the beginning days of conferencing. If video is failing, you can still have a meeting as long as I can be heard. So, having great acoustics in the room, having a great audio system, the right number of microphones, right number of speakers, good processing in that space is probably the first and foremost. So if I had, one place to spend money, that would get the biggest piece of the pie. And then I would say for people on the far end, it would be cameras, camera placement, and camera type. That's going to give the best experience to people remotely. And for people in the room, it's the displays. So obviously the technology and the cost for a display has come down greatly. And really, we're not running into issues like we used to before, where it was a question of, can I get a display big enough? Now it's more of how is the room designed, and is the room capable of supporting the display I need to put in the room to accommodate the use case, which is where it really, ties back into, engaging your AV consultant, your AV integrator early in the process, and make sure that the rooms that you're designing are, designed appropriately for the technology and the use cases that you plan to use them for.
If the issue is trying to make meeting equity, trying to make it so that the remote participant has a good quality experience, you have to consider why people do, as you said in the beginning of this, why they do single person to single person meetings so much is because that's the experience that they're either used to or they're looking for. So now you need to try and say, well, what is the technology that I need to give me that single person to single person experience, but with a room of 10, 25, 6 people, whatever the case might be. And it does then go to cameras. But what the end user has to understand is the AV integrator, the designer of the system, is going to choose a very different kind of a camera for one person on a laptop. Very different kind of camera is going to be needed for 10 people sitting around a table, or perhaps multiple cameras to do that intimate experience that they're expecting. It is very easy to just stick one camera in the front of the room. Wide shot picks up everybody in the room. That's very inexpensive, very easy to implement, but it doesn't give you that experience to the far end, the remote end of their being part of the meeting. If you want to start giving them that experience of being part of the meeting, you now start talking about multiple cameras, more expensive cameras. And as Jonathan mentioned earlier, the audio system is no longer just one microphone like what might be built into your laptop, or you might add it to a desktop or kind of a thing. That audio system is now multiple, honestly, very expensive elements. And the end users need to be prepared to understand that these elements that make up these systems, as Jonathan said so correctly, that system in that room has to become so much more complex and capable in order to, so that the remote participants feel as though they're in that room.
Daniel, if I can, I'd like to bring us down just a little bit, only because all of that seems a little overwhelming, I think, to people when you're thinking like, oh, geez, how much am I going to have to invest into each space? I think, what Jonathan said about there's a growth among the small and medium spaces. We see that same thing globally across the board. So I think that that's a fair thing to say, which is you're going to have more small to medium spaces than large spaces moving forward. I know, Cindy, you mentioned that there was a comment about it being a moving target, trying to get to a standard bill of materials for your spaces. I think realistically, the goal to try to set is to say, if you look at our spaces, there's always going to be some rooms at every size. They're going to have very strange dynamics acoustically, video wise. It's at a corner where you've got glass across two sides of it, so the sun's always shining in. You're always going to have a couple edge case rooms, but by and large, you should be able to look at 75 to 80% of your small and medium rooms and be able to boil it down to a couple of products that you can assign across those spaces. In those couple of edge cases, you can augment your standard bill, usually just with an additional acoustic piece or maybe one additional camera that would allow you to get into there. Once you get into the larger spaces, you are really going to want to work with your integrator to determine what the workflows are going to happen in that space, because you are dealing with whether it's audio equipment that's very expensive, a control system might be in there that is also tends to be a pretty big endeavor for certain spaces. And then you'll also have a plethora of different types of camera options you can apply there. I think what we're seeing right now from the ClickShare perspective, growing in the market, is we are seeing in the small to medium spaces an idea of trying to get everybody on board with, hey, we're going with one brand's collaboration bar, and we're going to go with the smaller unit for the smaller spaces. The medium spaces will get a medium-based unit, and if need be, we will pair that with one of their accessory cameras. Typically tends to be a center of the room camera, which gives a great participant view, back to that equity talk that we were going with. Now, is this a little bit more than you might have spent on a smaller medium room a few years ago? Potentially. Are you spending that much that you're breaking the budget? Absolutely not, because you're now to the place where you can get a collaboration bar with a center of room camera for $4,000 to $5,000, somewhere in that range. So there are, some real breakthroughs in simplification that can be applied to your standard set of rooms. Again, you would have to augment those for some of those edge cases or really difficult spaces. But there's at least kind of, I think, from what we're seeing with our enterprise customers, a goal, which is, hey, we're not going to get to a place where every room is going to be exactly the same, but we should be able to have the standard experience brought to all these spaces. So we should have one standard that we're going to that should roughly around 80% coverage. And then the last 20% will either be one-offs that we will still try to stick to our standard of the experience, but some of the hardware may need to be specialized, or it's an edge case on a smaller room that needs something to be added into it.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to steer anyone into thinking that it's all going to be very expensive everywhere that we go. But you're right. The advantage today is there are a lot of options out there. So you can create standardizations and create room types. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say from a design perspective, the time that we would have previously had to use designing those small, medium rooms and, the camera, the mic, the speakers, it's an all-inclusive solution now with a bar. Now kind of our, add on to that service is just knowing what's the right bar, what's the right camera in those type of applications. And then where we, really where we still need to get into more of a design application would be those larger one-off spaces, which it does free us up because we're not spending the time designing a huddle room. We're able to kind of take a more deeper dive into those larger spaces, which, with the current technology require a little bit more design and kind of, holding the customer and explaining and a lot of times demonstrating because they haven't seen, this technology before. It's new technology in the market. So we're spending a lot of time, mocking up, doing demonstrations, leveraging our showroom in Boston that you had mentioned where they can come in and see this stuff firsthand. And that kind of does help kind of drive home the use case and why you should spend the money in those rooms.
Jonathan, I can't tell you from my time in the past how many demos I've had to do for sound deadening and acoustic panels. And as soon as a customer sits in a room with them, they go, "Oh, yep, now I understand why we have to spec this into these spaces." But until you actually sit in a space that's had it, you're like, "We don't need to spend money on acoustic paneling. It's fine. It's just a wall of glass. It's no big deal." But it makes a huge difference on the day-to-day when you have an hour-long meeting with somebody and you're hearing it from the far end, almost like the Peanuts teacher from the comics back in the day, where all you're hearing is wah, 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 wah. Trying to understand and make sense of that is so difficult. So those demos are so important. I'm hoping that in the next few years, it just becomes our standard practice is always to talk about sound deadening and acoustic treatments in all size spaces, because it does make a massive difference. But if you think about those things at the outset, you can, again, build that into your standard bill of materials for the rooms so that you can get to that same standard that you can apply across most of your spaces.
Thank you for that. I want to get to a couple of the questions, or actually some of the statements, for BYOD situations. And this, I know, is going down a rabbit hole. We're not going to go too far down it. There's so many different flavors of USB-C. We discussed this on our pre-call. We're not going to go too far down this. The no-puck connection to ClickShare solves this really well. Other than that, is there a good way to help a customer understand capabilities their USB-C jack supports? I'm just going to say no. Label it.
Yeah, it really does come down to the quality of the cabling that you're using in the room, I think, is the best way to sum it up right now. I think my comment on our pre-call was that I hoard Cisco-based cables if I get them, because they do every single thing on the protocol that you need. So no matter when you need to plug something in, it always will work. But we are at a tough time right now because USB-C solves for a lot of things, which is great. But it means that there's a lot of expectations coming from the consumer-grade USB-C that may not be in the enterprise plug that you go to connect to your computer. And that is, unfortunately, a gap that I don't think any of us on this call have solved for. And if we have, we should patent it and take it to market real quick.
Well, the other challenge in that as well is the computers themselves. While they may have a USB-C port on them, it is not clearly defined what that USB-C port can do. I have 2 USB-C ports on my laptop. Only one of them will pass video. And so if your end users aren't aware of that, don't know that, that's going to cause a problem, right? So that's part of our job in the industry of educating our customers. Yeah, this USB-C is a wonderful thing, but you have to now know more about your laptop than you ever wanted to know.
Yeah, it's much like, when HDMI first became prevalent in the market. I always suggested to my customers, stick with your standard, which, is kind of dating, but still keep a VGA in the system, because every laptop will have VGA. And then you have HDMI, which is kind of that great technology. USB-C to that, some some laptops have USB-C but don't support video at all. Others have multiple USB-C and do. The AV, the commercial AV products on the market don't do a great job of supporting the full gamut of that connector, whether it be video, USB, data transfer, Ethernet, power delivery. They kind of, for bandwidth limitations and constraints of manufacturing, take, some shortcuts and drop one or two or three of those feature sets. So it's great to have. It gets back to that kind of utopian room where I just take one cable and I plug it in and it powers my laptop. It gets my cameras. It gets my video. But there's few and far between products on the market that support that. And then if you remove the room and you want something on a wall, that kind of all bets are off, because the technology just hasn't caught up to it. So I usually suggest, USB-C is great to have, especially if you have a end customer that can control their hardware deployment and they know what the end user is using. But it's always good to have that HDMI and USB as that fallback that everyone's used to and comfortable and knows how to adapt to. And everyone already has their Mac dongle that will get the meeting up and running. So it's good to provide both, at least until kind of the industry is able to streamline that solution.
Yep, USB-D maybe. So
please, not another connector. Please, let's just stay on C and get it right. I can't replace all of these dongles again another time.
Absolutely. So I want to give us a little bit of time to talk. Whether it's AI, we've got a lot of questions here about AI, and so our audience knows any of the questions that have not been answered here. We're going to try to get back to you. And I know there's a great, actually, just quickly, Jonathan, furniture. Are you seeing a trend in flex spaces where you have something that changes from U-shape layout to a classroom with rows? Any, because I know furniture's a big area for Red Thread with Steelcase.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, in our showroom, we have a room that we've been testing with multi-camera solutions and camera tracking for UC type applications, not just flexible furniture in terms of is it a U-shape or a boardroom or rows, but also height adjust, tables. Do we have a standing height? Do we have a, bar top table? Do we have that lounge style seating? That gives the customer choice, which makes those rooms a lot more user friendly. But in the past, it's always kind of caused havoc on the current tech in the market in terms of, it's expecting someone to be sitting in a certain spot. And that's really where AI is starting to bridge that gap, where it's not just based on where I tell the camera to go. It's able to have some intelligence to it. And if your face is higher because you're at a bar top table versus a lounge style table, it's able to adjust that camera view to accommodate. So it's definitely something that we're noticing and kind of seeing in the market, in something that, leveraging our furniture, department and kind of the insights that we get from them, it definitely helps us kind of preempt those and start to test that and evaluate it in-house, and then obviously show it to our customers.
Perfect.
I don't mean to promote Jonathan's room that he talked about, but I was in it a couple of weeks ago, and if you're in the Boston area, you should really stop by and see the multi-cam room that they've got going on there. It is really, really cool to see the different vendors that have been able to bring to market solutions that don't require somebody to basically sit behind the scenes and be like, we're cutting from camera 1 to camera 2. And that mixed with the furniture that Steelcase has, where you can go to adjustable height so simply, you really can create a room that can go back and forth between a U and rows very simply without needing an IT person to come in and change a profile or change the setup of the room itself. It will adapt in the moment to you now.
Here, I agree. An amazing space. So I want to give each of you some time, whether to really, based on our discussion today, some questions that you've been seeing coming in, what takeaway would you like to leave with our audience? I'm going to give you a couple minutes each, and Dan, if you'd start off.
Sure. I think the biggest thing to take away right now is that we're really in between two major influxes of change. The first being how and where we work over the last 5 years, and even as we're coming out of this, we're still seeing low occupancy overall in the U.S. and also in Europe. Mixed with the advent of AI and where that's going to lead us. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. It's a period right now where people feel very, they have a lot of questions about where does the next 5 years leave me as an employee, but also for us in our company. And so the biggest things that I can say right now are transparency, getting ahead of it, and being having a plan on how you're tackling both your workplace and your work environment, and onboarding these new tools that are going to help everybody, being upfront about what they're going to solve and how they're going to solve these things, and making sure to create those feedback loops. I think those are the biggest things right now that will help you really sharpen your workforce and make them out innovate your competitors that are in your market.
Great, thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, so I would definitely say kind of rethink what your standards are. A lot of the rooms that we're finding that are kind of failing are where we've kind of taken this old technology, these old solutions, and these old feature sets, and we're kind of just adding a Teams room or a Zoom room onto those systems. And that's really not how those rooms are intended to use. So to kind of, rethink what does that room need to do, and how do we need that room to behave, kind of from a ground up approach. I think you'll find that not only does the room become less complex and more user friendly, but it actually drives down the cost of the space as well. So I would definitely say kind of taking a look from a holistic approach of, what does my room really need to do?
Great tips there. Thank you. Daniel.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say to take away is you as the end users find ways to educate yourself on this technology, these Microsoft Team rooms, these Zooms, and understand what they do and understand how your enterprise environment wants to use them and implement them, and then reach out to the commercial AV industry, reach out to the manufacturers like Atlona and Barco, because we can help educate you, and then working with partners like Red Thread, create demonstrations so that you can actually see how they function. There's so much new technology coming up that if you're not in the industry and haven't had your hands on it, you wouldn't have any idea how it works. And so seeing how it works before you start implementing it is going to be almost critical to making a successful deployment.
Great tip. And get out to InfoComm. If you don't go to InfoComm and you're an end user, you got to go. So first, we want to thank Atlona and Barco again for sponsoring this. And Dan, Jonathan, Daniel, thank you so much for participating. It's been a really great conversation. By the way, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to, I think, probably tomorrow or later today even. Just sign back in if you want to listen to the recording. And now, after my goodbye, drum roll please, the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Nick Bandescu from Minnesota. Our team will reach out to you. Thank you, everyone, so much for all of your questions and participating. Have a great rest of your day.